The name Syracuse makes the heart of any Greek coin collector beat a little bit faster. The coins struck in this city have such wonderfully well-sculpted dies that it really sets it apart. When we think of Syracuse, generally the coins that come to mind are the big and imposing decadrachma with the bust of the nymph Arethusa and the sign dies from famous die engravers. But this city, ruled by so many tyrants and under the constant threat of bigger, meaner nations, particularly Carthage, produced a considerable number of gold coins in the classical period, a time when silver was by far the most important monetary metal. So today I wanted to show you some of these lovely golden pieces and talk a little bit about the interesting role played by gold during the classical period. You see, during what we know as the Greek classical period, that is the 5th and 4th centuries BC, the Greeks, after centuries of expanding all over the Mediterranean and founding colonies all the way to the eastern coast of modern-day Spain, established this really complex system of trade networks, with goods going from one end of the Mediterranean to the other. At that time, silver was the only true monetary metal. Some cities at the south of the Italian peninsula were experimenting with bronze coins, but for the vast majority of the Greek sphere of city-states, there was this very strongly ingrained distrust of bronze, or any coins made out of fiduciary metals. While gold was extremely scarce, there wasn't really enough of it around, and cities did not have enough of it to make big monetary issues with this metal. Obviously, gold was still very valuable, and it was a symbol of status for the Greeks, like it was for everyone else. We have historical records of huge statues and temples completely covered in gold, and gold jewelry from the classical period is quite abundant. But gold coins are scarce, only becoming common on the monetary standards of the later Hellenistic empires after Alexander the Great. There were gold coins issued in the classical period, but generally they were emergency issues. Maybe a city was at war and needed to issue gold coins as a way of coming up with money to pay its armies. The recruitment of troops was a particularly tricky thing for city-states. They had a relatively small population, with cities such as Athens and Syracuse, some of the largest ones, having around 250,000 inhabitants during the classical period, and the number of fighting-age men was, of course, a fraction of that already relatively low number. As a result, the use of mercenaries to supplement the Greek armies was super common. Gold coins were a great way of paying for these soldiers. The coins were gold, meaning wherever a mercenary was from, they could be sure that the coins would be worth something back home. And each individual coin was also valuable, small and portable. Carrying pounds of silver back home could be problematic. They would rather just carry a pouch of gold coins. And if there was a city-state that constantly needed to pay for mercenaries, it was Syracuse. Located at the eastern coast of Sicily, this prosperous city was at a wonderful location for commerce, but at the same time a super dangerous spot, right next to the Carthaginians and later down the line neighbors to the expanding Roman Republic, both nations that could mobilize massive armies and a constant existential threat to Syracuse. So let's have a look at some of these gold coins, which must have been at the pockets of some Greek mercenary at some point in the past. We start with Syracuse's most famous tyrant, Dionysius I, a very interesting and controversial character. On one hand, he was a very capable commander, ensuring the Greek presence in Sicily after constant wars against Carthage, but he was also a ruthless, bloodthirsty tyrant. Here we have a 100 litra piece, struck between 405 and 367 BC, weighing a very respectable 5.8 grams of gold. This must have been worth quite a few weeks of pay for a mercenary. Sadly, precise information, such as the kinds of salaries a mercenary would have received, are not very well known, but a couple of such coins could very easily be enough to pay for a month of service of a well-trained, well-equipped heavy hoplite. On the obverse we have the symbol of the city, the water nymph Arethusa, said to represent a spring of fresh water that supplied the city. She is wonderfully well sculpted, despite the small flan. We can see that her hair is tied to a piece of fabric on the back of her head. This piece of clothing was called a sakos. She also wears a lovely earring and a pearl necklace. And around her design, the legends, Syracusion, from the Syracusans. On the reverse, we see the demigod Heracles struggling with the Nemean lion. I like to interpret this reverse as Dionysus wanting to represent himself as Heracles, fighting the mighty Carthaginians in bloody hand-to-hand combat. It's a very complex scene, and it must have been very hard to sculpt, since the lion and Heracles are so tightly locked in together. We can see the hero holding the lion in a chokehold, while the beast desperately tries to gain some distance, pushing him away with his back legs. Wonderful. Next, we go to between the years 344 to 335 BC, and we're looking at a tiny 30 litra coin struck by Timoleon. History tells us that Timoleon was a complete opposite of Dionysus, championing the re-establishment of democracy in the city and inviting settlers from Greece to establish themselves in the now very depopulated Syracuse in an attempt to restore the city's economy and reputation after so many wars. He was another very competent general, inflicting a terrible defeat to the Carthaginians and restricting their control to the westernmost parts of Sicily. On the obverse we have the bearded bust of Zeus, the king of the Greek gods. This is the Zeus Eleutherios, or the Zeus Keeper of Freedom, an obvious move on Timoleon's part to show the soldiers were fighting to uphold Greek freedom, Greek sovereignty against Carthaginian oppression. Wonderful bust of Zeus wearing a laurel crown with some long hair and very finely engraved beard that makes me wonder if ancient Greek engravers had access to some sort of magnification technique, some sort of magnifier, as some of the details on his facial hair are really minuscule. On the reverse we have a lovely Pegasus. Timoleon was not born in Syracuse, he was from mainland Greece, from Corinth. Corinthian coins typically had a Pegasus on their reverse, so I wonder if this was a reference to his hometown, or a design choice, so the Corinthian mercenaries he so commonly employed would see a familiar symbol on the coins they were paid with. Probably a bit of both of these reasons justifies this design. Around the Pegasus, we have once more the legends Syracusion. And for our third piece, we have yet another tyrant, Agathocles. He ruled the city with an iron fist for 25 years, from approximately 317 to 289 BC, coming to power after massacring the ruling oligarchy. Before his ascension, the man was such a troublemaker that he managed to be banished twice from the city. Agathocles lived in the Hellenistic period, a time after Alexander the Great's death, when his conquered territories were carved into massive successor kingdoms, and he wanted Syracuse to become one of such massive Hellenistic power players in the Mediterranean. He tried achieving this by going on the offensive against Carthage, but it backfired horribly. It wasn't for his very good skills as a commander in a daring invasion deep into Carthaginian homeland territory while Syracuse was being besieged, which helped release the pressure from the city. Syracuse could have very well fallen to Carthage. His coins reflect his wish of ruling like a king. It imitates the gold staters issued by the great king of Macedon, Philip II, the father of Alexander the Great, and one of the first truly numerous gold coin issues of the Greek world. The weight of this piece might indicate an attempt on the part of the Syracusans of integrating the monetary standard with the rest of the Hellenistic sphere. It weighs an equivalent of half a Macedonian stater, around 4.2 modern grams, making it visually and metrologically very recognizable and compatible for any foreign merchants passing by Syracuse and receiving one of such coins as payment. On the obverse we have a gorgeous left-facing portrait of the god Apollo wearing a laurel crown. It looks very similar to the pieces of King Philip. Maybe the only obvious difference is that in the original staters, Apollo looks to the right. In the Syracusan pieces, I also noticed the tendency of the hair on the portraits being a little bit curly. It's always like that for Syracuse. I wonder if that's just a random stylistic choice on their part, or maybe the natives of the island had slightly curlier hair compared to the people back in mainland Greece, and this influenced the artistic style of the die engravers. On the reverse, we have a charioteer riding a biga. I love this scene here, super dynamic. The horses were sculpted in a way as to give the impression they were really dashing forward. The engraver had the sensitivity of not just copying one horse based on the other. Instead, each horse's head faces a slightly different direction, and their legs also move independently, helping reinforce this idea of movement. The rider can be seen leaning forward, holding onto the reins, with his hair flowing back with the wind. He's trying not to fall after that jolt of movement right after the horses launch forward. Under the horses, we have the symbol of Syracuse, the triskeles, which is still used in the modern flag of Sicily. It is theorized that this symbol comes from the old Greek name for Sicily, trinakria, meaning having three headlands. Finally, around the design, we have the legends, Syracusion once again. Absolutely wonderful coins. Which one did you like the best? Let us know in the comment section down below. And let us know if you have a coin from Syracuse. Thank you very much for the Moniker Ordinary collection for filming us these beauties. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you did. Happy collecting, and I'll see you soon.